Good afternoon, everyone. Today we have Lindsay Baldwin presenting on menu planning. If you have any questions during today's training, you can put those in the chat box. Make sure to send those to all panelists so that we make sure that we all see your questions, and we will get to those at the end of today's presentation. Lindsay?
All right. Thank you, Randa. And you can still hear me okay, right?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thanks. All right. Thank you, everybody, for taking time out of your still crazy days, I'm sure, since COVID is not slowing down. But thank you for joining. Today, we are going to talk about menu planning. So I will just jump right in. As you all or most of you should be aware that we fall under whole child under the Best for All strategy. We know that a hungry child cannot learn, and that is what you guys help to do to feed and nourish the whole child. Our school nutrition mission statement is to develop extraordinary school nutrition professionals and provide strategies to increase the consumption of healthy school meals. So I do want to do a disclaimer right here before I go any further, actually, because yes, this is the menu planning training, but I do know, and we are all aware, that we are still not back to normal and may not be back to normal anytime soon, so which of course we don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but this presentation is kind of meant for when things are back to normal. Some of this stuff does still apply now, but just know that yes, we know things are still kind of crazy out there. I will get to later in the presentation talking about some of the waivers that we have in place for these kinds of things. So just bear with me. And if you can, kind of just keep in mind what this would look like in a typical school year when you're doing menu planning. So today we're going to just briefly touch on the meal patterns and crediting, since that you have to know those. Those are big pieces of menu planning. And also procurement, your kitchen and staff capabilities, knowing your customers, customer surveys, food trends, and trying to incorporate color and variety. So first we will start with the meal pattern. The goal with the food-based meal pattern that you guys use in the school nutrition programs is to help the students learn a pattern of combining food items that would lead to healthy eating habits. So that is why we have the meal pattern for them to learn healthy meal habits. This is the school breakfast meal pattern. Again, this is not an in-depth for the meal pattern and crediting, but we're going to touch on these briefly for a minute. So here on this slide, you will see the school breakfast meal pattern. You've got milk, 1 cup per day. Fruits at breakfast, you have to offer 1 full cup. And half of that, you cannot exceed 50% of the juice requirement. Or juice cannot be 50%, more than 50% of your fruit requirement. And then vegetables at breakfast, you can count those towards the fruit requirement, because at breakfast you do not have a separate vegetable subgroup requirement that you have to meet. And then grains, you have to offer a 1 ounce daily equivalent, but you can see kind of on the second box there that your weekly requirements are different based on whatever age group you're serving. So you can see K5, you have to meet a 7-ounce weekly requirement for the grains. 6-8 is 8 ounces equivalent, and then grades 9-12, that is a 9-ounce equivalent. Also at breakfast, you do not have a separate meat alternate group that you have to meet, but if you are serving meat alternates at breakfast, you can count those towards the grain requirement. Now, do keep in mind you still have to offer 1 ounce equivalent of a true grain every day at breakfast. These are the breakfast dietary specs. So calories are different for, again, depending on which age group you are serving. Saturated fat, you can see that that's the same for every age group. Saturated fat has to be less than 10% of your total calories. And then we still have the sodium requirements. And remember, with trans fat, you cannot have any trans fat, so that must be 0 grams of trans fat unless you have some that is naturally occurring in some of your meat products might have trans fat that's naturally occurring. But besides that, 0 grams of trans fat. And then these are based on the average for a 5-day week. Now this is the lunch meal pattern. So again, with the milk component, you still have to offer a full cup of milk each day. For fruits, for the K through 8 age group, you have to offer a half cup of fruit, and you have to offer a full cup of fruit each day for the 9-12 age group. For vegetables, it's 3/4 of a cup for K8, and then 1 full cup of vegetables has to be offered for 9-12 each day. And then the grains, 1 ounce equivalent each day for grades K through 8, and a 2 ounce equivalent for 9-12. And then same with the meats, 1 ounce equivalent for K8 and 2 ounce equivalent of meat alternates for your 9-12 age group. Again, you can also see that the weekly requirements, they do require a little bit more, so you have to make sure that you're offering enough throughout the week to meet those weekly requirements as well. And then these are the dietary specs for the school lunch program. Again, the calories are different depending on which age group you're serving. We still have saturated fat has to be less than 10% of your total calories. Sodium is different depending on the age group, which you can see there. And then trans fat, again, still has to be 0 grams of trans fat. These are the vegetable subgroups. So when you are trying to do your menu planning, do keep all of those in mind. But those are all the subgroups, and you can see that their requirements are weekly. So as long as you are meeting the weekly requirements, offering a variety in all of these subgroups, then you just want to keep that in mind when you're menu planning as well. So with that, if you maybe just joined, you may have missed my disclaimer, but this is kind of what I was talking about in the beginning of the presentation, that you want to try to think of menu planning during a normal school year, but we know that this school year is still not back to normal. So you do have the meal pattern waiver for this school year. And we just sent out a couple reminders, I think maybe last week or 2 weeks ago. So if you have not completed a meal pattern waiver for this school year, you still have time to do that. If you realize that you never submitted one, you can still do that. But we do have the meal pattern waiver in place. So with that, the dietary specs for sodium, so the sodium requirements are waived. The requirement that all grains offered has to be whole grain rich, that has been waived. The requirement to offer a variety of vegetables from the vegetable subgroups has been waived. Offering a variety of fluid milk, so you would not have to offer 2 different types of milk as you would normally be required to do. You can also have milk, low-fat milk that is flavored. You still cannot exceed, like you can't serve 2% white milk or 2% flavored. It still has to meet either the 1% white milk or 1% flavored, or of course skim in either one of those, skim white milk or skim flavored. The meal pattern waiver also waives that you plan menus and offer food components for specified age grade groups. And it waives that for preschoolers, that all grains, at least 1 serving per day, is whole grain rich. And then it also waives for preschoolers that low-fat milk must be unflavored. So these are kind of some things that you can keep in mind right now when menu planning for the rest of this school year. We do not know yet what that's going to look like for next school year. If you need a copy of the meal pattern waiver, we have a link to it right here on this slide, or you can just email your regional consultant and they can provide that to you. And then of course, once you complete your meal pattern waiver, please send that in to Sandy Dawes, and her email address is also on the screen. With the addition of all of the waivers that I just talked about, there is also an additional milk waiver. So I know that some of you have reached out to me, some of my supervisors, about not being able to get milk right now, along with everything else that you're having trouble getting. So we do have a milk waiver, and if emergency conditions prevent you from obtaining your milk supply like you normally would, then we at the state agency can allow you to serve meals with an alternate form of milk or without fluid milk. So if you are still having trouble getting milk in your schools, then please submit this request again, you would submit this to Sandy Dawes, and her email is on the screen there. And this one will be approved on a case-by-case basis. So now we'll touch a little bit on crediting, because that is also an important part of menu planning. You definitely want to make sure that you're crediting everything properly to meet the meal pattern requirements when you're menu planning. So for those of you who may be new, which I know we have a lot of new supervisors, crediting is identifying that a food item meets a component in a certain quantity. And when I say component, if you kind of want to think of it as different parts of the food group, you can kind of think of it that way when you're thinking about components. So an example these examples here are, milk is pretty self-explanatory. A cup of milk meets the milk, what am I trying to say? Meets the milk group. And then in this example, if you're doing a half cup of broccoli, you could credit that towards half cup of the dark green vegetable. And another example is if you're offering pizza, that is a 2-ounce meat and 2-ounce grain. You could, of course, credit that towards both of those components. So pizza could meet for the meat alternate and the grain component. Some tools that we have for crediting are the food buying guide, child nutrition labels, USDA foods fact sheets, and product formulation statements. This is a screenshot of what the food buying guide website looks like. So some of you may be familiar with that. Hopefully all of you, if you've had a chance to work on menu planning at all. But this is an example of the food buying guide. This is kind of what, when you click into some of the subgroups in the food buying guide, this is an example of what those look like. So you can find just about everything that you need in the food buying guide. You can also credit using CN labels, and this is an example of what a CN label looks like. So we like to call CN labels the gold standard of crediting. If you have a CN labeled product, then you can take that over any of your other documentation. So CN labels are good to have, and you can use those when you're trying to credit your items if they are a CN labeled product. And then this is an example of what a USDA foods fact sheet looks like. So if you are doing any USDA foods, you would have the USDA foods fact sheet for crediting. And a product formulation statement, when you are pulling product formulation statements for crediting, they must be on company letterhead. They must be signed by a company official, such as a president, not someone in customer service or sales. And then it must demonstrate how the product contributes to the meal pattern requirements. So in this example, we have a burger. You've got the total creditable amount there. Up at the top, you've got the name of the item and the manufacturer. This is an example of a product formulation statement that you might see for a grain product. So you've got the product at the top, the manufacturer, and then you have how the item contributes. And you can see that it actually has, shows you like what the grams are and the creditable amount. You've got the total weight per portion and then how that contributes. So in this example, that's a 2-ounce equivalent grain. And then you can see at the bottom, it is signed by a representative, and that, in that case, that would work. It's signed by the labeling and regulatory compliance specialist. This is not an example of a product formulation statement. So if you gave us this, like for example, on an administrative review, we would have to have a little bit more information. We can't just take that it says a 2-ounce equivalent grain. So this is one that would not work. So now talking more about actual menu planning. I know a lot of you all have all your different ways of how you go about doing your menu planning. Again, now that we're in this segment, try to kind of think of it as if it were a normal school year. But some of the things that you can do when you are menu planning is that you can take student surveys and get the surveys from your students or your manager feedback on what they thought of the menu and the food items from the previous school year. You want to look at that kind of information to keep the items that were popular and help to increase participation. And then, of course, you would want to remove the items that were not very popular, or they maybe had too high of a food cost and they didn't have the participation to help with that. You want to choose a menu planning template. So some of you may have some as part of your software or an actual, like a menu planning software template that you use on there. But just choose a menu planning template. You want to review your current products and your commodity foods for the upcoming school year. Again, yes, I know that might be a little bit difficult to do at the moment, but we know y'all are doing the best that you can with that. Also, you'd want to keep a copy of the meal pattern handy so that you make sure, of course, that you are meeting all of the components and the meal pattern. Some other considerations when you are menu planning, you want to understand the skill sets and the types of equipment that you have in your kitchens. Some of you all may be kind of short on some of your equipment, so you might need to take that into consideration when planning your menus. Again, you want to gather and review your customer surveys, any student surveys that you may have sent out, and you can even take information and input from market trends. See what is popular in the market, even just at some of your fast food restaurants, things like that. When you're menu planning, you also want to make sure that you're looking overall at your menu. Yes, you have to meet your meal patterns and your calories and all of that, but you do want to make sure that your menu kind of goes well together and looks good. You want to think of it as what it would look like when you put it on the serving line. So things such as color, texture, and shape. And then also consider using your leftover ingredients throughout the week. Some more considerations for menu planning. There are a lot of things to consider, as you can see. Some of the things you want to consider would also be your food cost. So trying to get your cents per meal. You want to consider the equipment that you have available, your storage areas, your prep areas, the labor that you have, again, kind of knowing the skill set for your labor, knowing whether you all want to do more of a scratch cooking or more of a ready-to-serve menu. So just kind of knowing that and where your employees stand with that. You want to consider what you'd be getting for USDA foods, the number of serving areas that you have, again, looking at the current food trends. That is something that could be really helpful, especially if you are a school that is surrounded by a bunch of fast food restaurants, which I know that a lot of you are. And you say that every morning, you know, you watch all the high schoolers going into their fast food restaurant. Well, see what they are bringing into the school, and you could try to do something similar. You want to look at your manager feedback, student preferences. You also have to consider your delivery schedules and your available revenue. So again, take a step and look back at what your menu would look like. Consider what it would look like on the serving line. Does it have a variety of color, texture, shapes, and flavor? Do your menu items partner well together? So that can make a big difference too, because would you rather eat baked ziti with corn and pinto beans, or does it sound better to do baked ziti, a garlic breadstick, a salad, and mixed vegetables? So kind of looking at making sure things pair well together too. Cycle menus, those are menus that are repeated over a specific period. I know some of you have 2 to 3 week cycle menus. There are a lot of advantages to cycle menus. So it creates consistent menus throughout your district. It helps with your vendor orders, helps to have easier inventory management, helps with your cents per meal, your production records and recipes, and also it helps to increase your staff confidence and efficiency when they are doing the same meals in the same cycle. So those are some advantages of cycle menus. You do want to consider your age group when looking at your menu planning and your cycle menus. You could do a 3 to 4 week cycle menu. I know some of you just do maybe even just like a 1 week cycle menu for breakfast. And if that works and if that's popular in your district, then there's nothing wrong with that. So it's kind of just depending on all the things that we talked about previously and what you have on hand and the staff that you have. The cycle menus also help your managers to forecast meals for production record purposes. It helps them with weekly ordering. It reduces waste and also helps your students to not get tired of the same menu items. Another thing that you could consider is switching up your menus based on the season. So when you are, you could have different menus for fall, spring, and summer. Some examples are here for fall. You could do more of your dark green items like your, well, you always have to have a dark green, but just making them more seasonal items such as your broccoli, your turnip greens. In the spring, you can look at a lot of your fresh lettuces, maybe more of your fresh fruits, and in the summer too. So kind of just looking at your menus for the season and trying to go about them that way. Some other things that we have heard that do help to build participation excuse me, are to do the limited time offers. So take advantage of any special events that you all have in your schools. These are some really popular things that you could do that they really do, again, help participation. It just makes it fun to come into the cafeteria and celebrate whatever the students are celebrating. So in these examples here, like homecoming, cheeseburger day, the Super Bowl, March Madness, which is coming up soon anyway, so that could be something to think of. Cinco de Mayo, so there's different theme days that you could consider when planning your menus. Another thing is that you can reinvent your common items. This actually could be something that you guys do right now if you are not doing already, just with the limited availability that you all have in trying to get items in general. But just taking those common items and using them for multiple purposes. So in this example, you have a burger patty. You don't just have to do a plain burger. You can do a bacon cheeseburger, a taco cheeseburger, mushroom and Swiss. So, and there's some more examples there, but just kind of switching up, using the same base menu item, but adding different flavors to it. So that is some of the burger ideas. You could also do different things with a chicken patty. That is very versatile. You don't have to just do a chicken sandwich. You can do chicken and waffle. You can cut up your chicken to use in entree salads. Nashville hot chicken, of course, that's very popular these days. And then chicken parmesan, different things like that with the same menu item. And then some examples for chicken nuggets would just be, instead of just plain chicken nuggets, you could add some seasoning to them to make them buffalo chicken nuggets, or you could do the teriyaki chicken, add them to your salads again, or even use them as a pizza topping. So I know you all probably have had to get very creative this year. If you're running out of ideas, here's some ideas for you. And then cheese pizza. Again, you don't just have to do plain cheese pizza. You can do all of these different kinds. Add some veggies to make it a supreme. You can do barbecue chicken, even a mac and cheese pizza. There's just some different ideas there, because I know pizza is probably a big seller for everybody out there. Chili, you've got all these different ways to use chili. So thinking outside the box and not just serving it as chili in a bowl. You can add it to all of these different things. So menu planning steps to remember. Remember that you want to keep a copy of the meal pattern handy to make sure you're meeting all the requirements. You want to go through and plan 1 week at a time. Make changes if you need to. Make sure that you're keeping your variety and your colors and your textures, those kinds of things, keeping those in mind. Look at your opportunity to cross-utilize items, which we just talked about. Making, you've got one chicken patty, you can do 10 different things with it. So kind of looking and thinking outside the box for those kind of things. Take a step back and literally look at your serving line. When you've got all these things planned, it might sound great on the menu, but then you get it on the serving line and realize everything is the exact same texture or the exact same color. So here in the top left, we have the serving line. Everything is just, you don't see much color on that. Compared to what we see in the bottom right, we see lots of color and texture variety with you see the carrots there and the broccoli. Both of those add a bunch of color to the line. So just taking a step back and looking at the serving line. Same thing here. In the top left, we have just a bunch of brown items, and then there's a lot more color on the picture on the bottom right. Same with even just looking at your fruits. If you see that this could be your serving line, which still looks good, it still has color with the fruit and the fruit cups there and the lettuce and tomato. But this is the same serving line They just rearranged how it was on the line. So you can see that those are the same exact items that have been put on the line. They were just organized differently. So that can make a huge difference, and that is, it doesn't cost any extra money to just kind of rearrange your serving line like that. Now, as we kind of talked about throughout the presentation, you do still have some waivers in place, and we know that this is not a normal year still. You guys are still trying to deal with trying to get items in general, and you have no idea what your menu planning is even going to look like. So we are aware of that. Some things that you can do right now to address your supply chain issues that you're having. One is to contact your local producers and your small minority or women-owned businesses. If you can do that, we know pretty much everybody is struggling right now, so maybe reaching out to your local producers would help them as well. So if you can do that and get items from them, that's something that you could do. Remember, too, that you can utilize the meal pattern waiver and the flexibilities that we have in place for this year, which we talked about earlier in the presentation. But all of those meal pattern waivers and the milk waiver if you need it. Another thing is what we just talked about, taking one product that you hopefully can at least get one product and make multiple menu items out of it, since everything is in short supply for the time being. So that could be something that you do. And then we do have one more waiver that is in place. I think this also went out a couple weeks ago, but just a reminder for you all, if you were not aware, that we did receive the nationwide waiver number 100. This waiver waives the fiscal action for any meal pattern violations resulting from supply chain disruptions. So do keep that in mind as you are trying to get enough items in to serve the kids. That fiscal action has been waived if you can, if it is truly because of a supply chain disruption, and if you've got the documentation to back that up. But that can kind of cover you too with all of the issues that everybody's been having. So here we have the training survey. If you are at your computer, you can go ahead and either scan the QR code or you can click on the link that says feedback survey. These open to the same surveys, so you don't have to do both of them. But if you could just take a minute to provide that feedback in the survey, we would appreciate that. And then this is my contact information. So I am here in Middle Tennessee, but you can email me or call me from any part of the state that you're in. So if you want my contact information, here it is on the screen. And with that, Randa, are there any questions? If you could read those.
Yeah, someone just wanted to clarify about the meal pattern waiver that was discussed, and is that the same one that's already available?
Yes, that is not a different one. We have just the one in place for this school year. So if you already applied for the waiver at the beginning of the school year, this is not a different one.
And then there was another question about getting a copy of the slides, and the slides will be sent to everyone who is logged in via email. So those email addresses are used to send the follow-up for these trainings. And that's all the questions I have.
Okay. All right. Well, with that then, I will not take any more of your time. I know you guys are still super slammed and just trying to keep your head above water out there. So thank you all for everything that you have been doing, truly. I know we're getting back into more cases of COVID, so just thank you for hanging in there and everything that y'all have done for the past 2 years now. It is very appreciated for the kids out there. So thank you all for joining, and I hope you all have a good rest of the week.